Welcome to the subject Database Management System. Today's session is session number 15th and the topic is the database system environment. Point number 1, a DBMS is a complex software system. Point number 2, in this section we discuss the types of software components that constitute a DBMS and the types of computer system software with which the DBMS interacts. Students, you very well know DBMS is a complex software system and it interacts with the various software components to carry out the task. In this figure, you can very well know there are many components, okay, and the figure is divided into two halves. One is upper half, another is bottom half. So in the upper half you got many interfaces and in the lower you got various software components. If you look at the figure, you can find that in the upper half you got users, okay, who are DBA staff, casual users, application programmers and parametric users. This DBA staff interacts with the second line DDL statements and privilege commands, whereas casual users have got interactive query, application programmers have got application programs. DDL statements are compiled by DDL compiler and the interactive queries are compiled by query compiler. Application programs are compiled by pre-compiler. Okay, pre-compiler separates DML statements which pass on to DML compiler, and the host language compiler takes up host language statements, and DML compiler and host language compiler again send the statements to compiled transactions. Okay, you in the very bottom you got bottom half. In the left side you got DBMS catalog or data dictionary. In between you got runtime database processor. In the bottom you got stored databases, and towards very right you got stored data manager, and there is concurrency control backup recovery subsystem. In between, the upper half and lower half there is a DBA commands, queries and transactions. In between stored database and stored data manager you got input output from the databases. The figure is divided into two parts. The top part of the figure refers to the various users of the database environment and their interfaces. The lower part shows the internal modules of the DBMS responsible for storage of data and processing of transactions. Point number 4. The database and DBMS catalog are usually stored on disk. Access to the disk is controlled primarily by the operating system, that is OS, which schedules disk read-write input output. Point number 6. A higher level stored data manager modules of the DBMS controls access to DBMS information that is stored on disk, whether it is part of the database or the catalog. Let us consider the top half of the DBMS component module. In the figure, the top half shows, first it shows the interfaces for the DBA staff, casual users who work with interactive interfaces to formulate queries. Then you got application programmers who create programs using some host programming languages. And third, parametric users who do data entry work by supplying parameters to predefined transactions. Point number 2. The DBA staff works on defining database and tuning it by making local changes to its definition using the DDL and the other privilege commands. Third point. The DDL compiler processes schema definitions specified in DDL and stores descriptions of the schemas, that is metadata, in the DBMS catalog. Point number 4. The catalog includes information such as the names and the sizes of files, names and data types of data items, storage details of each file, mapping information among schemas and constraints. Fifth point. Casual users and persons with occasional need for the information from the database interact using the interactive query interface. We are still in the upper up, students. Point number 6. These queries are parsed and validated for correctness of the query syntax, the names of the files and the data elements, and so on by a query compiler that compiles them into an internal form. This internal query is subjected to query optimization. Point number 7. Among other things, the query optimizer is concerned with rearrangement and possible reordering of operations, elimination of redundancies, and use of efficient search algorithms during execution. Point number 8, continuing with the upper half. Application programmers write programs in the host language such as Java, C, or C++ that are submitted to pre-compiler. Point number 9. The pre-compiler extracts DML commands from the application program written in host program language. Point number 10. These commands are sent to the DML compiler for compilation into object code for database accesses. The rest of the program is sent to the host language compiler. Continuing the upper half, point number 11. The object codes for the DML commands and the rest of the programs are linked, forming a canned transaction whose executable code includes calls to the runtime database processor. Point number 12. The canned transactions are executed repeatedly by parametric users via PCs. These users simply supply the parameters to the transaction. Point number 13. Each execution is considered to be a separate transaction. An example is a bank payment transaction where the account number, payee, and the amount may be supplied as parameters. Students, now will consider the lower half of the DBMS component module. Point number 1. In the lower half of the figure, the runtime database processor executes 1. The privilege commands, 2. The executable query plans, and 3. The canned transactions with runtime parameters. Point number 2. It works with the system catalog and may update it with statistics It also works with the stored data manager, which in turn uses basic operating system services for carrying out low level input output, that is read and write operations between the disk and main memory. Point number 3. We have shown concurrency control and backup and recovery system separately as a module in this figure. Point number 4. They are integrated into the working of the runtime database processor for the purpose of transaction management. Point number 5. It is common to have client program that accesses the DBMS running on the separate computer from the computer on which the database resides. Point number 6. The former is called the client computer running DBMS client software, and the latter is called the database server. Point number 7. In many cases, the client accesses a middle computer called application server, which in turn accesses the database server. Figure Point number 8. Figure 2.3 is not meant to describe the specific DBMS, rather it illustrates typical DBMS modules. So students, I'll be sending PDF of this. Okay, you please draw the diagram, write the notes in your notebook. Thank you.